God be with you. Welcome to Hillhurst United Church this morning. We welcome you. We're going to start. It's time, but I know people will make their way in. There's a banner out front that says, whoever you are, wherever you're at, join us. And you did. I give thanks for that. There's lots of other places you could be this morning, and making time and space to be here is so important to us that you are here. There are four core practices. One is hospitality. So there's coffee to my left, and I think there's even something to eat there. We believe in this church that eating and drinking together is how we're transformed. Get to know each other, realize we're not alone, hear different opinions than the one we have, and begin to be transformed by one another. So hospitality is how that works. Spirituality, we're all spiritual beings, whether we know it or not. Some of us come to church, some don't. That's fine. But in this place, we want to honor the work of our soul. And so throughout the week, opportunities, 7 days a week, to deepen what we believe and who we are in the world. Spiritual nurture. Social justice, how do we walk the talk? Easy on Sunday, the rest of the week can be hard. How do we join together with others to change the world? And it's grounded in risk. So that's who we are and how we try to live in this community. Give thanks. Today we are grateful we're gathered in the traditional territory of Canada's Indigenous peoples, the Blackfoot, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, and Northwest Métis homeland. There were people before us on this land, and then over 100 years ago, people got together, pooled their resources, and built these very uncomfortable pews just for you. And we give thanks that they created this our historic place and space to daydream, to wonder, full of rich symbols about who we are as Christian folks. Today is the second Sunday of Lent. So we began last week, and this is the second Sunday where we're looking in Lent in our community at a life text, so a real theology, a movie, and then the biblical text. How do they come together? And so today we're going to look at Boy Erased, and you'll hear a great team of people sharing some of the stories around it. But next Sunday is a movie called Black Panther, of which I have watched and invite you to see. If you don't want to watch it, but you want to be in a great conversation, tomorrow night at 7 to 8:30 or 9, we talk about the movie. Whether you've seen it or not, doesn't really matter. What are the themes and how do they speak to us about life and faith in the world? Black Panther is tomorrow at 7. And next Sunday morning. Another announcement I'd just like to make is the Enneagram. Next Saturday morning, we invite people to come together 9 to noon, a chance to look at who you are. During Lent, there's a time of reflection about who we are and whose we are, what triggers us, what do we celebrate about who we are. There are 9 different energies. You all have one, a dominant one. So who are you? And so next week, Saturday 9 to noon, we'll look at the 9 energies. This will help you in your workplace. This will help you in your relationship if you're in one with others. This will help you understand who you are. And the better we understand ourselves, the better we are in the world. So I invite you to that. All I would ask is that you would just email the church, say, I'm coming, so we can have enough food and handouts ready for you next weekend. That's a lot of announcements. If you're new today, a courageous thing to come to church. We welcome you. Just to my left around the corner, I'll be there after worship, is the hub, a chance for you to get any information about how this church works. Our breath was taken away this past Friday as we heard about our brothers and sisters in a faraway land called New Zealand, a place that I have been to, a place that is peaceful and remote in some ways, you might think, from violence and conflict. And yet we were reminded on Friday and the shooting in a mosque where people were gathered to pray, where someone went in and 50 lives have been lost. You may have Muslim brothers and sisters, and in this worship today, I'm just going to simply light this candle to remember them and for us to remember that we are called to love. And that is what we are called to live here and in the world. And so we remember them as we light this candle, praying as we are prayers ourselves in the world for peace. Hi, Gary. We take the Christ candle, and Christ's message was of love. And we give thanks for all the different world religions, all different and unique as they should be, that celebrate peace and love and justice. And it is for us, individually and collectively, to take that love and peace into the world and to draw the circle wide as we do so. Amen. Will you rise with me as we sing, Draw the Circle Wide?
morning, everyone. I am Keith Murray, your Affirming Coordinator here. And today we are acknowledging and observing what was just on March 14th, 3.14, National Affirming Pie Day. So it was a perfect song to lead us in this, Drawing a Circle. Hey? I want to welcome back Pam Rocker, who is here from Affirming Connections, now in a larger regional role. And this morning we have a very large pie that we're all going to be sharing pieces of to explore a very important theme. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So on Pie Day, we had many of you come and we baked 20 pies to celebrate our affirming community. We invite you all to join us after and taste the sweetness of what being a part of a loving and affirming community is like. There's one special pie that has John Pentland's name on it. And we will be, what we're going to do is we're going to be auctioning off at 12:15 to the highest bidder the chance to have the honor to cream our beloved John in the face with a whipped cream pie. Why are we doing this? We're going to talk about that today. In a landscape of many unhealthy and harmful faith communities, this is a really playful way to subvert some of that damage and help us build a better and more inclusive faith community. The honor will go to the highest bidder, and all proceeds are going to be going towards a very exciting initiative. This year, Hillhurst is celebrating its 10th year of being an affirming community. And as part of that, we're starting a new project. We are going to produce and publish, as a gift to the world, a handbook for LGBTQIA plus individuals, families, and allies of faith. So all your contributions will go towards the development of this project. What does it mean to be affirming? Well, our affirming statement is right outside on the front. Wherever you are at, wherever you are at, join us on the journey. We strive to accept each other and welcome each other and the ministry and participation of all, irregardless of sex, of gender, identity, or expression, of your health, your race, your nationality, your sexual orientation, differing abilities, religious or ethnic background, or economic circumstance. All truly are welcome in this place. So why PIE? PIE is actually a lovely little acronym, P-I-E. P stands for public, I for intentional, and E explicit. This is a litmus test that we, as affirming faith communities, can check in. Our journey started 10 years ago, but it was just the beginning. So we need to constantly be reflecting on, are we being public? Are we being out there and saying what we mean, what our values are? Are we being intentional? Are we continuing to actively learn, plan, and grow in our journey of inclusivity? And are we being explicit? Are we making it known that you are welcome here and there are no caveats, exceptions, or conditions about who you are or who you love? So thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing some pie with you, and I will pass it over to John.
Well, some people here have had a great week. Something new has happened, a change, a transformation, and they're excited and can't wait to tell you. Some here this past week have been experiencing grief, a death of someone or loss. Some aren't sure why they're here, but here we are. So whoever you are, wherever you're at, we welcome you to this place. We will say some words together, and I'll invite you into some silence and invite you to open your heart, that your heart might beat with the Creator's. Please join me. All-encompassing one, we come to you, holder of the widest circle of all. We come to you with our grief, with our burdens, with our joys, and our gratitude. Open our hearts and help us to widen our circle, that we may include those who have been cast outside by others. Help us to remember we are of you, we belong to you, we come in stillness. As we breathe, we open our heart. Names and faces cross our consciousness. People we're worried about. Places in the world where violence or abuse or poverty reign. Things we're thankful for. The brilliance of the sun, the warming of the days. In our silence, we breathe that our breath and your breath, O God, connect and beat as one. May our hearts be warmed. May our breath be one as we sing together the words Jesus invited us to live. For Christians, the Second Testament is the writings, the Gospels, the letters that speak about peace. And there are many ways in which to say that word. In our tradition, it might be peace. In another, it might be shalom or salam or namaste. But in Paul's letter, he says that nothing can separate us from God's love. And we need to be reminded of that, and perhaps that's why we are here today, to be reminded that peace is our calling. Peace is compassion and love come alive in our bodies, and the invitation is to live that. So trust that we are loved, forgiven, and set free. And greet one another with the word that works for you today. Peace, shalom, salam, namaste. Peace be with you all. Peace to you. If you're new among us, Kids Space is traditionally called Sunday School, but it really is a chance for kids and youth to be together, and you'll see on the screen opportunities, or you just go out the door to my left, and we will greet you, and Kids Space happens. One of the reasons that we share our offering in worship is to remind us of gratitude, and we reflect on the gratitude for which we have. And part of the giving in this church and the many other places that you support is sharing our wealth with the world. And so our offering will now be received now or online or various ways in which you say thank you. Our offering will now be received.
your tears. Turnstiles and crooked miles mark the road home, and travel seems aimless when all on my own. But answers are many and questions too few on the path that the world wants to have me believe leads to you. So the earth sits on a wall, silently trying to mend. If the earth had a great fall, would you still be there to pull us together and make it all better again? Turnstiles and crooked miles mark the road home, and travel seems aimless when all on my own. But the answers are many and questions too few on the path that the world wants to have me believe leads to you. God of the infinite flight, time in the warmth of your wing. Fly with this spinning green earth, sweep through the valleys, the rice fields, the alleys, fill us with your song that we sing. Turnstiles and crooked miles mark the road home, and travel seems aimless when all on my own. But the answers are many and questions too few on the path that the world wants to have me believe leads to you.
Holy One, we return the gifts you first gave us, that we may be about the work of expanding your circle and celebrating your love. Amen. Good morning. I'm Don McLeod, one of the ministers here on the team, and I just want to do a brief introduction. We're going to do things a little differently this morning. As Keith said, we have a large pie, and we've divided it up into different slices. So we have a difficult film to wrestle with, Boy Erased. How many people have seen this film? Okay, so a number of you. We had a full discussion about this last Monday evening in Spiritual Nurture, and many themes came out. So we've worked together as a team. We've invited Pam to be with us today, so thank you, Pam, for coming back to Hillhurst to share your experience and thoughts. Kim Follis has agreed to be with us to share, from a personal perspective, his response to the film. So thank you, Kim, for being here again this morning. And after we'll show the trailer first to give you an invitation into the film, and then after their responses, we're going to take some time to create space for prayer, to be able to reflect on what this means to us and all the themes that are emerging from this film. And then Keith and I will try to make a response to what we're hearing this morning. So we're not all doing 20-minute sermons, so just in case you're wondering, they'll be brief, but the reflection will happen and evolve over the rest of the service. So we hope that will give you different ways to see and receive and experience this film and what the messages are that come from that. So let's first start by watching a brief trailer to give you a sense of the film for those who haven't seen it.
Jared, I want you to do well. I want you to have a great life. I love you, but we cannot see a way that you can live under this roof if you're going to fundamentally go against the grain of our beliefs. Jared, tell me the truth, that's all.
I think about men. I don't know why. And I'm so sorry.
Your parents signed you up for a program to fix you, but Jared, you are a perfectly normal, very healthy teenage boy.
They're gonna do things for you.
You're a revelation.
You want to say goodbyes?
Welcome to the Refuge Program.
You cannot be born a homosexual. This is a lie. It's a choice.
Go. Fake it till you make it. Become the man you are not. Save yourself.
Jared, God will not love you the way that you are.
Is this what you want? Who's gonna strike this demon down? Hit him!
It's a rocky
I'm having a tough time.
I'm gonna give you some advice. Tell them whatever they want to hear. Play the part, unless you really think you can change, or even want to.
What you're going through right now is just a moment.
A moment.
Yeah.
A moment.
I love God, and I love my son. For your father, it's a little more complicated.
We are not finished.
I am, because you won't listen.
Your father is sitting here. Tell him how you hate him.
I'm not gonna pretend I hate my father. I don't hate my father.
Then where is all this anger coming?
Because you're making me angry.
Open the door now.
Mom!
They say sometimes you gotta hurt a child in order to help them, but a mother knows when something isn't right.
I don't want to pretend anymore.
I've had to ask myself and God if I'm ready to lose you.
You're a revelation. Won't you liberate me now?
So I'm Kim. Lori's in the front row cheering me on this morning. First of all, before I speak about Boy Erased, between services I made a phone call to a Muslim friend of mine, Saima Jamal. Saima's spoken here in our church. She's active in the Muslim community, and just to let her know that we are supporting, praying, and that we lit a candle this morning. And she told me how much that meant to her that I called her. Believe it or not, she's been fielding calls from angry white supremacist men screaming at her, telling her how horrible Muslims are and that they're all liars in the face of this tragedy in New Zealand. So I took a photo this morning on my phone of the candle, of John lighting the candle, and I texted that to Saima and just said, a candle for our Muslim family. And I suggest, we have to do something. I suggest taking a photo and posting it on, if you're a Facebook person, whatever you do, or just we need to get it out there, because the church is being used as a weapon of hate right now by certain people. And so anyway, I just encourage you to do that, and reach out to a Muslim friend or neighbor if you can. She told me that there's a Somali mosque here in town, and a white man walked into that mosque uninvited and was walking around checking the place out. And they asked him to leave, and they had to call the police. But you can imagine the fear that's being created. And this is in our city. And so anyway, just something else for us to be active about and to reach out in love to our Muslim friends and neighbors. So now back to this movie, if I haven't brought you down far enough already. So two scenes of this movie that have particularly affected me, and when I did watch it, I cried through most of the movie. There's a scene that we don't see in the trailer of the son, his parents, and the elders from the church have a meeting in the kitchen of their home, and this is where the decision is made to send him into conversion therapy. And in that moment, the father chooses to see his son's sexual identity as a moral and theological problem that needed to be erased, and then asked his son to be an active participant in his own self-annihilation. And the kicker is that it's God that's going to hold the eraser to make this happen. And then the second scene is that scene in the conversion therapy institution
where gay men who have supposedly graduated from that program try to turn other gay men into real men. And if it wasn't so tragic, it would be comic to see what they're trying to do and how this is actually playing out. But just the pain and the denial, the self-hatred, and the desperation is indeed tragic, and it leads one of those young men to commit suicide. So, backing up to my own life and how it interacts with this movie, when our son Jeff was 14, he came out to us, and so we've made a journey with him that actually ended up leading us to Hillhurst. But the other night, on Thursday night, I was actually thinking about what I was going to share this morning, and Jeff walked into the kitchen about 10 o'clock in the evening, and he was coming back. He was in a show, a musical this week. He was one of the stars in the show, a musical called Title of Show, and our own Bruce Petherick was also in that show. It was terrific. Yeah, Bruce did a great job. And so I was just standing there in the kitchen. I had some vinyl on the turntable, Roxy Music, Avalon, which Bruce and I both agree stands up to the test of time. And but Jeff came in, and I asked Jeff a question. I told him, kind of what I was going to be doing, what I was going to be saying on Sunday. And I asked him a question that I had never asked him before. I asked him, so Jeff, what if I had chosen to see your sexual identity as a problem that needed to be fixed? And he said, Dad, that would have devastated me. And he said, it was such a gift that you didn't do that. And so I said to Jeff, Jeff, thanks, but your coming out was a gift to me because it forced me to look at the dissonance in my own life between the community of faith that I was a part of and the way that I see LGBTQ people, and forced me to choose and create an alignment between how I see God, what my view is of faith, and my view of my son. And when I look at us as a community, as Hillhurst United Church, and that means each one of us, all of us together in this room, we truly are a living witness that God does not hold an eraser that is trying to erase the essence of people and the kind of devastation, and we are against the kind of devastation that we see portrayed in this movie, in the movie Boy Erased. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim and Lori, for being who you are. I know myself, and I'm sure many others, live through these stories because our own parents haven't gone on that journey together, so thankful for you. Can we have like a sigh together? Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, because I didn't breathe for like the last 5 minutes, so. I'm so pleased to be back here. I wish it was a happier theme in some ways. I like to throw in a few jokes, but it just didn't work this time around. But I'm so happy because this is a really important conversation, and it matters to us right now in 2019 here in Canada. And I'm happy to be a part of you honoring and celebrating National Affirming Day and Week. So, conversion therapy, sometimes called reparative therapy, can take many forms. And it's important to note that these programs actually don't call themselves conversion therapy or reparative therapy because most claim that they don't want to change anybody. They just want to help them control their behavior. Sometimes they call it behavioral correction. And that is really strategic because it further disconnects the person from themselves by dehumanizing sexual and gender diversity. into an action that has to be contained rather than authentic expression or way of being. And these programs can take on the form of a full-on camp that sometimes runs for weeks or months and are very expensive. But there are also day camps and evening courses complete with textbooks and homework and journaling. Many of the courses glorify, as you have seen if you've seen the film, a public airing of non-gender conforming thoughts or feelings under the guise of providing a moral inventory for the sake of repentance and healing. It's also important to note that this doesn't just affect gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, but also transgender and gender nonconforming people. Because one other root of it is gender policing and gender phobia. To say a man should look like and do this, and a woman should look like and do this. So it affects many of us. Now, if this seems too bad to be true, and you are heterosexual, it may be helpful to imagine being forced to attend courses where they try to make you gay. They try to suppress any outward evidence that you're straight and convince you that if you make a commitment to a lifelong marriage with the same-sex partner, that you will be cured. Playwright and performer Peterson Toscano talks about his $30,000 17-year journey inside of conversion therapy, saying, "It reinforced this notion that there was something very, very wrong with my insides, that my feelings weren't natural, that they were actually demonic." And that sort of teaching is so psychologically damaging, especially to young people. If you believe that, then you will do whatever you can to rip up your own soul. Sadly, I regularly meet with people who are survivors of conversion therapy. I usually don't go a month without meeting somebody new who has been subject to this or is finding a way to get out of it. It's become so normal to me. It doesn't shock me anymore. And that makes me really sad. Because sometimes I just think, yeah, another sad story. I still find it horrifying. I recently met with a university student who had confided in her mom that she thought she may be gay. And her mom threatened to cut off all communication with her unless she agreed to go and see an ex-gay author who ran these programs. She couldn't bear to lose her mom, and she couldn't bear to lose herself, so she wondered, maybe I should just pretend I never said anything. Who wants to lose the ones who gave us life? In January, I met a 65-year-old man, and we were in a workshop together about conversion therapy legislation. And we were talking after the workshop, and he told me that he had gone through a conversion therapy program as a young adult. And as such, he had decided to leave the evangelical church that he was a part of. And he later became a psychologist and journeyed alongside many LGBTQ people in an affirming way. And that brought him a lot of solace. But yet for him, he still didn't feel free. He mourned the loss of his faith, the faith that he was told he had to leave behind 40 years ago. And as we talked, he wept openly, missing this void, this piece of himself that he was told he had to leave behind still 40 years later. And wondered, could I ever find a place where I could be all parts of myself at the same time? And this just illustrates for young and old that it affects so many of us, not just young people who are forced into it by their family members or people who live in what we would consider restrictive parts of the world. It's happening right here, and its effects are really, really long-lasting. For example, in the 2017 annual report released by Journey Canada, Canada's largest conversion therapy organization, but there are more, they cited working with 93 churches and organizations in 42 cities in Canada. 10 of those churches are here in Calgary, at some of the largest churches here, with a total of 24 just in Alberta. And they state that they proudly ministered to 9,100 people just in 2017. You can find their annual report online. And this doesn't count the numerous people who perform conversion therapy on themselves every day, perhaps never speaking a word to those around them. Friends, it's so systemic and insidious. And it affects all of us whether you know it or not, and you know someone who's gone through it, even if you don't know. I know there are many of you in this room who have been subject to this. And it's not an interesting movie theme for you. It's just been a reality that you survived through. Some of my best friends have gone through this. And perhaps the residue of our experiences, maybe religion has asked many of us, regardless of sexuality or gender orientation, to fracture ourselves. And for you, I say, I hope you know, as the United Church of Canada Creed says, that we are not alone. We live in God's world, a God who created us to be as we are. And good religion never asks us to fracture ourselves in order to belong, but instead invites us to be more of who we are and not less. So friends, take these facts that are really sobering, also with the gratitude that places like this exist, and with the question for ourselves, what are we to do? And know you are loved. And I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you're alive if you've gone through this. And you truly aren't alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim and Pam. So we are invited to hold the tensions, the questions that come up in this conversation. And we come to the place in our worship where we honor and celebrate the prayers of the community. And this means we name and identify and express those things that we struggle with, those things that we are suffering with, and those things we want to celebrate. So I invite you now to raise any concerns or any things to celebrate.
In gratitude for Justin, who led us to Platinum at the Choral Fest.
Okay, thank you for Justin.
My brother-in-law, Dimitri, has liver cancer.
A brother-in-law who has liver cancer.
I'm wondering whether the Christian community should start attending outside mosques and synagogues with our big crosses on our necks to protect our friends of other faiths. And I don't mean violently, but through peaceful presence and prayer.
To offer peaceful presence and prayer in whatever form, but to stand with our sisters and brothers of the Muslim traditions. We're glad you're here. It's okay. That's okay. We're happy you're here. What's your name? Rachel. So we lift you up, Rachel, for all the things you've struggled with and for the continual reminder that you are who you are, and that's God's gift to you and to us and to all people who struggle with all kinds of differences that the world doesn't understand, that we may remember them and that they might know peace. Thank you. For Jeff, whose father passed away yesterday. For a positive outcome on the Amber Alert this week. Thanks for a positive outcome on the Amber Alert from Edmonton this past week. Thank you. Gary.
It's from a blessed mother who's in heaven now, who died about 3 months ago. My brother's in heaven too. Both my brothers.
We remember Gary's brothers and his mother who died.
I feel very grateful. I've been just visiting for a few weeks, and I do feel welcome and very inspired by this gift.
Thank you. Just visiting for a few weeks and feeling grateful and inspired to be here. We're glad you're here. So let's hold all of these thoughts and expressions and concerns and celebrations as we sing our song and then move into just a moment or two of silence to remember. Holy One, hear our hearts, and may we be opened again to the reality that we are your love for your world. As we sing, amen.
Good morning. Today's reading is taken from Luke chapter 14, verses 15 to 24, the parable of the great dinner. One of the dinner guests, on hearing this, said to him, "Blessed is anyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Then Jesus said to him, "Someone gave a great dinner and invited many. At the time for the dinner, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is ready now.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a piece of land, and I must go out and see it. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to try them out. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I have just been married, and therefore I cannot come.' So the slave returned and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and said to his slave, 'Go out at once into the streets and lanes of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' And the slave said, 'Sir, what you ordered has been done, and there is still room.' Then the master said to the slave, 'Go out into the roads and lanes and compel people to come in so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner.'" Amen.
Your revelation, won't you liberate me now from a holy bound? Your revolution, I will liberate you now as the walls come down. It's a rocky road to say, maybe I won't go. Hey dear, you're a wrecking ball. It's a revelation. There's no hell in what I found. No kingdom shout. And how the tides are changing as you liberate me now. And the walls come down. Till the end, it's a rocky road. To say, maybe I won't go. Hey dear, you're a wrecking ball. And you're here, crushing all I'm told. Ever I roam, your hand I know. Ever I roam, ever I roam, ever I
Thank you, Meredith and Bruce, for that powerful rendition of the song that actually is weaved through the whole film, Boy Erased. It was beautiful. Thank you. And the song holds the tension I think we all feel as we reflect on these themes. There's the tension of what damage unhealthy religion can do to us individually and collectively as a society. But it also holds the promise of redemption, that there is hope for us to move through these difficult themes. And one of the big questions that emerged for us as we reflected on this movie the last few weeks was, why do religions so often become unhealthy? How is it that the source of love and compassion and justice for so much of human history can also at the same time be the source of so much division and pain and injustice and even violence? It's one of the great paradoxes of human life. This movie is a clear reminder that in an unhealthy religious expression, many of our children become unsuspecting martyrs of their own parents' faith. How do we get there? How is it that religion can become so destructive of the things it's trying to indeed build up in the world? One of the ways to understand this, and there are many, and I'm going to attempt something in the next 5 minutes that I don't suggest you try at home, which is to try to explain, at least give one reason why religion can turn so ugly and so unhealthy. But let me give it a whirl. Unhealthy religion emerges in some ways in the world because of our own spiritual and religious worldviews. And our religious and spiritual worldviews are developed and evolve over time. And they shape us. They shape how we read the sacred texts. They shape our images of God, and they shape how we understand life and how we relate to life. The parable of the wedding feast that we just read has been used by many, many Christians to suggest that the only those who say yes to God and say yes to God in exactly the right way with the right words and the right process, only they will be experiencing the wedding feast of eternal life. Yet when I hear that parable, all I can think of is how expansive the wedding feast table really is. How the divine one is continually setting and resetting the table and inviting and re-inviting all those without condition in a reckless, abandoned love that simply says, come home. Come home to who you are and whose you are. So how do we understand this unhealthy religious practice? So I want to just show you something really quickly. I don't need you to take all this in, and I reserve the right to bring this back to a future reflection when I have more time. However, it's a glimpse. This comes from about 50 or 60 years of psychological theory and research around how we develop as individuals and collectively as religious communities. And what it suggests to you, and I'm going to only focus on the three in the middle, so the mythic, literal, the rational, and the pluralistic. There's several stages of development that we all are invited into as human beings and human communities. And think of a child in the mythic, literal stage when they're maybe 4 or 5. They start to embrace the stories that we share as a community with them. And they start to see and understand life through these stories and symbols, and they just receive the story in innocence. And they don't have the critical thinking to say, is this good or bad, or is this right or wrong? They just receive the story, and they live the story, and they believe the story. And that's wonderful when you're 5 or 6. Not so good when you're 45 or 56. So these stages are inviting us to move through development, to move through growth. We're trying to never stay stationary in our religious expression. So the idea is, and the call is, that we move from the mythic literal into the rational. And somewhere in our adolescence or maybe early young adulthood, for some of us, maybe we don't get the opportunity until much later in adulthood, but somewhere we move to ask questions. Well, wait a minute. These stories can't all be true. This doesn't make sense to me. By whose authority do these stories come to me? And we reset. We actually do the work to individualize, to say, this isn't my story, this is my story. This is the authority that I will trust. This isn't who I will trust. And so we move to a new place. And this place, in every religious tradition at every stage, can either be a moderate expression or it can be an extreme expression. And if we move along the path, then we might get from the rational, which could take us into atheism or humanism or Greta Vosper's version of atheist Jesus. There's all kinds of ways in which this can be expressed. But if we keep moving and listening and learning and being open, it could take us into pluralism, which is this much more open and expansive table where we come and agree and accept and see and recognize in all the great religious traditions there is a deep truth and wisdom. There is a collective response to love. And we appreciate, and the multicultural dimension of that community becomes vibrant and open and free, and the practices might vary, and the celebration is broad, and the table is wide, and the welcome is inclusive. And I believe that Hillhurst is a community like that in this postmodern way, that we've moved from the mythic literal to the rational to now this open and pluralistic community. But there is a shadow to this, and Ken Wilber, who has done a lot of work to build on James Fowler and others, would suggest that there's a shadow in each of these stages if we don't pay attention. And the biggest shadow he talks about is addiction. That at any stage, individually or collectively, and even more dangerously as a whole religious community, we can get stuck in one of the stages. In fact, we can get addicted to it. We can begin to see that this is the only way to see the world. This is the only way to understand how life works, who God is, and who I am. And when we get stuck in that addiction, we negate or reject any other stage, and our growth stops. And unhealthy religion comes out of a place of stuckness, literally, in the growth process. Even Hillhurst, which is this vibrant community that I experience as a pluralistic, open community, needs to continue to grow and evolve and develop and to pay attention to our own shadows, to move to the next step. And I think one of the ways we're moving into what is now being called the integral or the universal is to recover an ancient practice which is new again around contemplative ministry. Because it's inviting us to understand in much simpler terms, without all the complexity, who we really are and whose we are in the unity of all things. But when we're stuck, like in the movie, we find this family stuck in the mythic literal, we become unhealthy expressions of love. The mother in the movie demonstrates powerfully and courageously how we move from the mythic literal into the rational and beyond. And in one moment she says, I love God and I love you. For your father, it's a little more complicated. How's that probably true for many of our families? But for the father, he can't move. She actually begins to ask questions through this process. She's willing to question authority. She's willing to challenge her own church and her own husband and to stand and be a courageous voice of love for her son. She's moving, you can see, from the rational into an expansive view of the world. The father, at the end of the movie, is having a conversation with the son, and the son is leaving, and the son knows the father's not processing this. He's in denial. So the son turns back to the father as he's leaving, and he says, I'm gay, and that will not change. If we are going to have a relationship in the future, it's you that will have to change. You're stuck, Dad. You're addicted, Dad. You're entranced in a power and an authority that's corrupt, that's demeaning to you and to me and to our world. So we're invited through this movie, through our own life experience, through those in our community that have the courage to come out and say who they are and live who they are, to hear that welcome, to become a different community. And the move from the pluralistic to integral is what I want to invite you into. I want to suggest to you the best way to respond to this is for us to show up and to be who we are in the world and to model that. And to model this means to continue to grow and develop and to be open. So I want to leave you with the words from Bruce Sanguin, who was our resident theologian this last year, because he paints a picture of what's evolving. And he paints the picture by saying, look what we're learning in the last 50 years. Look at how God is inviting us into an yet even more expansive table for all to come to. Here's what he says. The universe exploded into being. Leave it alone, and after 13.8 billion years, it becomes aware of itself in and as you and me. This is a stunning moment. A realization of our deep time identity. It is only in the last 50 years that we have had access to this knowledge. This is a game changer that no school of wisdom and no religious tradition had known about. We are not separate, lonely individuals, desperate to connect in an isolating and uncaring universe. It's not simply that we belong in the universe. Of course we do. It's that we are the universe, evolving in human form. Our belonging is so radical, so deep, that there is no disconnection anywhere. There is distinction, of course, and differentiation, of course. Yes, part of the great celebration of diversity in oneness. And yes, we may feel alienated, but if this is how we feel, then it's only because we have lost connection with reality, with our deep cosmic identity as the universe in human form. This unity is primal. It took an entire universe and all this time for it to arrive at you and me and us. May the promise in this vision of the world continue to shape and reshape us as a community. I invite Keith to close by offering a call to action.
Thank you, Don. So, after a very difficult conversation, I first want to say how grateful I am that you're all here showing up to have this conversation. My parents, my boyfriend. I'm honored and challenged with the task of delivering a benediction now, the good speech, the blessing. And I can't help right now but think of our Muslim family in New Zealand and across the world grieving right now. This is the effect of bad religion. Like we saw an example in the Christian tradition, there was a terrorist who attacked a Muslim community under the banner of Christianity and white nationalism. They could have learned something had they opened up to their friends from the Muslim faith. In all religion, there is a core seed of truth. There is a treasure. And it exists in all faiths. And there's a term that we may have heard of before. You may have heard of it the first time coming from bad religion. And that's the term jihad. But this term doesn't mean holy war in Islam. It is not a call to war at all. It's a call to peace. It's a word that means struggle or striving. There is a lesser jihad, the struggle to enable the community to have the safety and the space to practice their faith. And that was something that was disrupted so horrifically this week. This is something that we are trying to create here. There's also what is called the greater jihad. And an understanding of this term is something that the person who committed that heinous act desperately could have used. And there's something in that that is teaching for us all right now. The greater jihad is a struggle to overcome our base impulses of the ego, our reactive nature. The struggle to overcome our anger, our fear, our despair, so that we might discover our essence, discover our connection to God, and become beacons of peace and love in this world. Marianne Williamson, in her campaign for the presidency of the United States right now, said, "While we are good at preparing for war, we do not wage peace on the levels we need to." I can't help but think of that when my blood boils up, when my partner does something that triggers my stress response. God bless him. I've been on a rampage Marie Kondoing our apartment this week. But I think we mentioned this before, but every now and then it's just the crumbs on the counter or the dishes in the sink, and I see red. I lose my rational abilities. I digress into an earlier stage of development. And it's like a switch is flipped, and suddenly I'm a fire-breathing dragon, and I am ready for war, and I'm instantly armed with the memory of every single thing that Kevin has done to hurt me, has failed at in the past. I'm ready to use these deadly weapons against him. But this is why the concept of greater jihad is so important, and the Sufis, or the contemplative core essence of Islam, emphasize it so much, because there is an ability to override this reptilian response from our brainstem to fight or fly. We can evolve. This is what Christ called us to do, what Muhammad, peace be upon him, called us to do, what every enlightened embodiment of peace calls us to do, what God calls us to do. But how do we transmute that energy? Today, when you heard the reality of conversion therapy going on right now in this city, you may have felt some sadness, maybe some anger. But the call is not to let the harshness of this world turn our sadness into despair, nor our anger into hatred, as Yoda spoke of. That is the path to the dark side. This just fuels war. Like the seed of treasure in every religion, there is treasure in our emotions. They are a gift from God and a gift from love. And if we can open those and unpack them, we can see the gift inside of them. That our sadness maybe stems from a lack of love. That maybe our anger stems from a failure to protect someone. And then we can transform that energy into healing ourselves and the world. Our emotions are gifts to fulfill this vision of God planted in us. They are energy in motion, emotion traveling to us that we can use as fuel to build a better world. The Artist's Way, this book that I've been practicing thanks to the inspiration of Sheena, our minister, who is now joining us in a new capacity, has taught me that our dreams come from God, and God has the power to accomplish them. We could not have the dream for peace on earth if we did not have the ability to accomplish it. I'm a bit of an optimist. So this is a call to peace. And we have ministers here who are willing to take a pie to the face, to turn the other cheek, and create peace and love in this world. This is compassion in action. This is that gift of emotion transformed into building something constructive. We can be the change. We can be beacons of light and love in this world. And we can fulfill Christ's vision of heaven on earth for harmony amongst all beings, all religions, all people. Let us lay down our weapons, and as we are called to, take up garden equipment instead and grow fruits that we might harvest and prepare a feast that all can join us at the table. Maybe we can enjoy some pie together. I invite you all to stand now if you are able, and let us sing and renew our spirits in this vision.
Like a river of tears, our love pours upon us. Like a winter of blessing, your grace will sustain us. Like a star-studded sky, your spirit shines o'er us, renewing our spirits with courage and faith. Like a bird in free flight, my windows around us. Like the wind in the forest that breathes life among us. Like a phoenix that's rising from ashes around us, renewing our spirits with vision and grace. Like a pillar of cloud, your promise to guide us. Like a bright fiery bush, you come to speak to us. Like a calm cooling breeze, your spirit breathes in us, renewing our spirits with loving embrace. Like a lover's caress, your spirit revives us. Like a song of the soul, you come to speak with us. Like a prayer of the heart, you heal and restore us, renewing our spirits, the future to face.
God, you who are peace and love inviolable, bless us in our efforts, in our struggle to overcome our sadness, our grief, our hate, our anger, and our fear. Help us to become who you in Christ Jesus calls us to be, channels of peace, of joy, and of love. Help us be a mother and father to those whose parents cannot accept them. Help us be a brother or sister or sibling to those in the world who need family right now. Help us to envision the world we all dream to live in. Give us the insight and the will to build it, knowing that we do so, we are not alone, but together with you, O God, and with each other. Amen. Let's enjoy some pie.